Good evening. This is the Cunningham Township Board meeting. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Miss Wu,
Here.
Mr. Evans,
Here.
Miss Hersey,
Here.
Miss Colasetti,
Here.
Miss Bishop, Miss Wilkin,
Here.
Mr. Quisenberry,
Here.
Mayor Marlin, Supervisor Chenoweth,
Present.
Assessor Owana. Here.
The next item on the agenda is approval of minutes from September 16, 2024 public hearing, as well as September 16, 2024 regular meeting. Can I have a motion?
I'll move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved by Jaya, seconded by Grace. Any corrections? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those
Aye.
opposed? All right, are there any additions to the agenda this evening?
No, they're not.
Thank you. Presentations, I don't believe we have any. Next up is public participation. If anybody would like to address the Cunningham Town Board meeting, you have 5 minutes. Please step up to the microphone and state your name for the record.
My name is Itai, I-T as in Tom, A-I. Last name Segev, S as in Sam, E as in Edward, G as in George, another G, E as in Edward, V as in Victor. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the advisory question 1 that was recently on the ballot. It passed. I was not a supporter of this advisory question, but that's the democratic process, and I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is that I put out one sign against the advisory question, and within 24 hours, it was stolen off my lawn. I put a second sign out, and I think it took about 5 days for it to be stolen off my lawn. And so I put a third and fourth signs out, and I put them in close proximity to my picket fence in the hopes that that might deter people. And either that worked or it was just close enough to the election that people didn't bother because they made it. But certainly stealing signs off of people's lawns is not the democratic process. I know this wasn't necessarily restricted to just this question. I heard about Harris signs being stolen and whatnot. And I don't know what this board can do about this, but I just wanted to bring this as a question of, as an issue of concern and something that if there's something the township can do to sort of improve the environment and discourage this sort of non-democratic behavior, I think that would be a good thing. On a completely different question, I watched the previous township meeting where there was discussion about salaries, and one point that was not raised by anybody, so I thought it might be useful if I pointed this out, was that there's been a roughly 24% inflation since 2020. I know there were cost of living increases in the various roles, or at least some of the roles, but I'm sure they did not add up to 24%. And so, taking what 4 years ago as a baseline, you might want to take into account that there's been significant inflation since then. And so I just wanted to offer that thought as a hopefully helpful one to the board, excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Anybody else like to address the Cunningham Township Board?
Hi, my name is Brian Maxwell. I'm a resident of Ward 5, I believe, right over there on Elm Street. So I wanted to come and talk tonight about actually the same issue, Q1 on the Cunningham Township. So for those of you who weren't familiar with it, this was, basically providing the direct question to people in Cunningham Township: should we end military aid to Israel, who's been committing, or there's overwhelming evidence of gross human rights violations, and we were asking voters, basically putting that question in front of voters to end military aid. The results of that, I don't know how many people were following it, was other than uncontested ballot races and probably the protecting election workers question, I think it was the most popular question on the ballot, passed with overwhelming support. 70% of Cunningham Township voters supported it. So I'm here tonight speaking on behalf of a few different organizations who couldn't be here tonight because they're all over in Champaign City Council tonight talking on the same issue. CU Muslim Action Committee, UC Jews for Ceasefire, Channing Murray Foundation, Prairie Liberation Center, Party of Socialism and Liberation, all the organizations who spent, over the last year been pretty instrumental on building public support for this, trying to put this question, getting the kind of doing the public outreach and canvassing to inform voters of what's going on. So first I want to thank the township for letting us put that on the ballot. I think it's awesome that the township process provides this whole process for direct democracy where we're able to put this question in front of voters directly. It's not often that voters have get to express their voice necessarily on matters of foreign policy at the local level. But just like back in 2006, I think either that was at the township or the city council, voters also voted on it, to express their discontent with the whole Iraq war, and I think that was instrumental in what turned out to be, in hindsight, a massive foreign policy disaster. So it's good that we can put these issues in front of voters. So not just for that point, but also to give policymakers who are actually at the state and federal level. Obviously, this was a non-binding resolution, but it helps really provide a direct poll of voters how they feel on an issue when it comes to foreign policy. So send that message to state and federal representatives. So now, I guess our next step on this, the organizations who helped put this on the ballot and see it put through. Not only do we want to express that as a community, we would like to see that message basically be communicated from the township to our state and federal representatives. I think it's important for that not not exist in just a vacuum that this happened in Cunningham Township, but to actually be relayed to the people who actually have a say in, who actually make the policy decisions when it comes to this. So that includes, Congressional Rep. Nikki Baczynski, State Treasurer Mike Frericks, and obviously U.S. Senators Dick Durbin and Tammy Baldwin. So we're happy to work with the township. We can reach out. I'm just here tonight to basically say that this is something we would like to see done. We think this is particularly timely because within the next month, Congress will be voting on a joint resolution of disapproval on the same issue, sending military aid to Israel. We'd like to see this message communicated to our state reps leading up to that. So we're happy to reach out and work with you on this, and that's all. So appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Would anybody else like to address Cunningham Township Board? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to Committee to Verify Bills. Danielle?
Good evening. Let's see. So this last month, in the town fund, we had $60,929.81 in expenditures. In the general assistance fund, we had $192,034.04. Our total expenditures for the month were $252,963.85. The town bills are in your packet. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about them before going through the officer's report.
Grace?
Thank you. Thanks for the breakdown here. I was wondering if I could just clarify, because I got a question about this, and sorry I didn't pass it to you earlier, but about some of the overhead and salary versus direct assistance. And some of my recommendations was looking at this was kind of piecing out the GA fund from the town fund, that has the assessor and the supervisor, and looking at the GA fund proportion and seeing that is still, I think it was roughly, less than half, maybe 30 or 40% kind of admin personnel and things. And then some of what I was, imagining the rationale was also a lot of the case management. And I know we have staff kind of helping with paperwork, and that there's a lot of service provided in addition to direct monetary assistance. So I didn't know if you could just fact check or give any of your input on that for people who are asking about that proportion of staff to direct assistance.
So your question is specifically about the General Assistance Fund, I assume?
I guess kind of first of all, if that's the right way to look at it, to kind of pull out GA as the service fund
Yep.
rather than the total town fund.
Yeah, and I think first I would direct you back to the budget just because, like, how we pay out for services does not, like, if you look at 1 month, it's not really going to give you a picture, but you look at the whole budget. So essentially, when I started 8 years ago, it was an administrative function. So the township would basically see if you qualify for general assistance, yes or no, you get a check. What we saw were such an overwhelming need for accompaniment, advocacy, licensed social work, and support that a significant portion of the general assistance budget, and I could pull that from the budget, not the specific month, it's direct service. So it's not paperwork. In fact, our paperwork, we really try to focus on trauma-informed care and wraparound services. So there's a lot of client contact. In our emergency housing program, both with families and individuals, case managers typically communicate with their cases daily, and they have once a week conversations, sit-down meetings to go over goals. But between, I would say they're texted or called almost every day, and usually it's from the participant who's asking for support getting ID, asking for support accessing transportation, something's wrong with their food stamps, their Medicaid got cut off. So I think what the public needs to, what I would like the public to understand in response is that essentially we started as an administrative function only office, and we built supportive services because of the demand and requests of the constituents we serve. The second thing is that in our general assistance program, the staff is largely grant funded. So most of it is not tax dollars from the levy, but it's essentially staff members who oversee programs that are funded through grants. So I guess and I think for those who are on the board in the first 4 years, we actually ran a hotel program without case management. There may be some who remember that. I would never go back to that again. I will never run a hotel program. In fact, Regional Office of Education ran a hotel program that had no case management, and they recently closed it completely. They have no hotel funds. They're not continuing to do that work. So I think you would be hard-pressed to find a place that is going to operate direct assistance, especially around housing and workforce development without supportive services. It's kind of putting people in a situation that's impossible. Now, we do have our utility assistance and our food assistance and a lot of our communications assistance is very and even rental assistance, it's very high volume, low staff time. So rental assistance, we actually have 1.5 FTE who runs rental assistance, which is kind of crazy to use that word because we did 277 rental assistance cases with 1.5 FTE. That person is paid for out of the levy. But when you look at housing services, we are comparable to RPC. We use the same kind of case management approach, which is 8 to 10 cases per person. And although that may sound like a very small amount, if you're working with families who are 3 to 6 member families, every single person is being case managed. Every single person has shoes, clothes, schooling needs, mental health, rape crisis, all of those pieces. So especially for our family services, I really try to keep it to 8. Whereas for some of our individuals, we can go up to 12 cases per case manager. If you try to go over that, it really becomes impossible. So I think it's important to understand that we're providing wraparound services in response to both our learning about the needs and the demands and requests that we've seen from our constituents. And that a good portion of those dollars are not funded through the levy, but through grant funds.
Thank you.
Sorry. Are there any other questions about the bills? Can I have a motion to put the bills on file? To approve the bills.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by James, seconded by Jaya. Any discussion? Roll call vote? Roll call.
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
All right, reports of officers.
So in the memo, which says November 11th, but it's actually 12th, yeah, I just want to point out a couple of things from the memo. This is the first time we've seen a slight decrease in general assistance in a while. We're at 101 as of this memo, but we, as of today, are at 106. So we're back up. We are seeing a high number of folks on our general assistance rolls who are homeless, 26. We had gotten that number close to 0, and it's bumped back up. So I'm going to just keep bringing that back to your attention. We had 65 applications received and processed in October for rental assistance, up from 36 in September. We are still basically capping that at 1 month rather than 2 months and 200% of the poverty level. Luckily, we were able to squeeze a little bit more out of our SMAS grant for rental assistance, so you'll see that in the agenda for today. We're at $56,000 additional dollars added to the tax levy with the SMAS money. We have been, as I mentioned last week, we've been trying to get a handle on how many people are actively unsheltered. Last month we served 65 folks with street outreach, actively sleeping outdoors, representing 49 households. We counted 150 approximately actively sleeping outside. I think I brought to your attention at the last meeting our concerns about the number of people actively unsheltered. There was a homelessness summit today at Champaign Public Library. Councilman Evans was there with us, and the chief officer of the Office of Homelessness at the state of Illinois came and basically showed that there was across the board, we saw 30% increase in homelessness as of January point in time count. I think that's increased since then. And across the board, across the state, they're seeing 25 to 40% increases. So they did pull recent data for later in the year, and what they're seeing is a significant spike in homelessness, not only in Chicago, but throughout the state. I know there's a lot of conversations about whether or not immigrants are involved in that homeless statistics, and although they are, many of the places seeing record net amounts of homelessness do not have large immigrant populations and are not resettlement communities. What we talked about at the homeless summit today was looking statewide at the significant spike in rents that people have seen throughout the state, and really seeing that as a major factor. We're also seeing increases in chronic homelessness, which is not recent homelessness, but folks who have been on and off homeless for a period of time. I will share that report, that presentation with you when I get it sometime in this next week. I think there's a lot of interesting data, and the plan to end homelessness that the state puts together every 2 years just came out. It was just released last month, so I would encourage you to take a look at that, and I'll send that out as well. I wanted to announce that with our staff expansion, we were able to reallocate more time to housing navigation case management. I think what has been of concern is that we had one case manager for both the wait list and the folks in family shelters, so the wait list really didn't get much attention. We now have a case manager who is specifically working with the wait list. That wait list is about 17 literally homeless families as of this morning, which is a very high number going into winter. And so essentially, they are getting regular communication from that case manager. She also provides aftercare. So once we move folks in with a voucher, she provides the monthly check-in that we have with our housing authority MOU. So we're trying to do kind of more continuum of case management services and support, even if we're not able to necessarily house the families right away. That said, we will have 100% voucher utilization by next week. So all of the vouchers that we have for the year will be taken care of. It'll be the middle of November and we'll have to wait till January, which is fine because most of the families in our program are new at this point. And so we're working on vital documents and getting all the things that they would need to prepare for the voucher process. Let's see, we, all of our programs are full in terms of housing, except for street outreach is never full. We do the best that we can. And we have a rapid rehousing program that's funded through the Home Illinois Fund. And we have 4 additional units out of our 10. And so we're continuing to look for literally homeless individuals and families with income where we basically provide tenant-based rent assistance. So that program is going well. Let's see, I would say, so Ameren, right before the winter, they do a slew of shutoffs. So they essentially force people to pay their back due bills before they can no longer shut them off, which is when the temperature is too cold. It's kind of a brutal month for a lot of folks. And I've arranged so that essentially our office receives the addresses of every Urbana resident who's facing shutoffs. And I will say it's in, it's topped 100, 150 residents facing shutoffs in the last month. Anyone who calls from that list, because we basically verified that they're shut off, we're able to, to work with them to immediately address that issue. LIHEAP is also open now, and so we're referring folks to LIHEAP, and there will be a new program where essentially people who qualify for LIHEAP will pay less on their gas. And there's another program that's kind of weaving its way through the legislature and the process that would have them pay less for electricity. Let's see, I think the only other thing I wanted to share is our Solidarity Gardens. Harvest Festival was last Saturday. We basically put to bed all the gardens. We have 72 gardens across the community with the free plot program and the affiliate gardens. And so we did a thank you to our volunteers. We had about 120 people through that event, and we're really trying to make our events trilingual as much as possible. So we've been English, Spanish, and French outreach, and then have been working with various forms of technology to kind of incorporate full translation in all of our events. So that went really well. I think the last thing I just wanted to share with you is last week I told you that I'm doing a calls for service study at Cunningham Township. I pulled the last 3 months of incoming calls to our office, and they have averaged 1,711 calls per month. We used to, before the pandemic, it was 700, 800 calls per month maximum. At the height of the worst of the pandemic, when we had the highest number of calls and no one was able to get unemployment, we had 1,900 calls. So I do have that historic data from 2020. So being at 1,711 is concerning to me. So we have 17 full-time equivalents. We had 1,711 calls, which does not include walk-ins. I'm also going to do a study of walk-ins and emails so that you can get a complete picture. According to the Barry Dunn report, looking at calls for service through 911 to the Urbana Police Department, which has 74.5 full-time equivalents compared to our 17, they received 1,355 calls per service per month. for community members. So 1355 compared to 1711. And I don't know if they have like how much email communication they receive. So I just want to put that piece out there that I think as we look to do an alternative response task force, and I know that there is a pause on that task force, it's really important for us to look at material needs and the calls for material needs in the conversations about emergency and crisis response. I think we have a very outdated understanding of crisis that really only looks at crime or possibly, the 72% of calls that are nonviolent or non-criminal, which are not crime, but noise and other kinds of things. And we're not really thinking about like, I can't eat, I don't have a place to live, I don't have a coat, all kinds of, my water is shut off, my power is shut off. These are issues, these are the main calls that we're receiving. So I wanted to provide that information for you. And I will continue to update those numbers and get you kind of more of a robust assessment. That's just a total calls for service incoming. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions for Danielle? Ivana?
No additional reports, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I backtrack? Danielle, what are the conversations about the impacts of the vote related to strides?
It's devastating. It was always the plan that strides would be maintained by a higher levy. The levy at the city of Champaign is 1/7 the size of Cunningham Township. Thank you, Urbana voters, for increasing our tax levy. But that was, we already had like substantial levy. And this year, as we saw with the elections across the board, I mean, people are struggling and a tax referendum is difficult for them. And I don't blame people who are struggling to say, hey, I don't want a sales tax, I don't want a township tax. But I do think it's important to look at, first of all, I think those taxes are different and a sales tax is regressive and this was a property tax. This would have been maybe $100 a year in terms of total amount. And so what I think and I said this at the Homeless Summit today, I named strides. The survival of strides is the #1 challenge that we're facing in our community. That's our only low barrier shelter. We have fewer beds than we had in 2016 for emergency housing when we had both Times and Salvation Army. So we've not seen a huge rapid expansion, but we need our low barrier shelter. And so I think what I recommended to the group is, one, the cities, the county, and the townships all have to put in for our low barrier shelter. Two, I think they need to come back to the voters, maybe with a more modest proposal for tax funding, and they'll have to do that during an off year. And I think they're going to have to really explain over a longer time horizon and tell the story of strides. In the meantime, what we have to do is move folks who are in strides, who don't really need a low barrier shelter, but really would be more qualified for transitional housing into transitional housing. And what you'll see on the agenda for tonight, sneak preview, is the IGA with the city of Champaign that basically allows us to accept funds to run a winter shelter for 20 residents in roommate pairs, so 10 rooms, 20 residents. And we've already started that process of gathering referrals and starting to do the roommate matching, because we hope to launch that in 2 weeks. We have hotel partners selected, et cetera. That would take 20 folks out of strides who get SSI, SSDI. They're not going to get additional income. It's a voluntary program, so it's for those who are interested in living with a roommate in independent housing. And And I think that that model could be helpful for us going forward. We did a survey of who was in strides on SSI and SSDI. And I mean, I don't think people understand that the homeless population is a population of people with disabilities and seniors. It's largely what the literally homeless population looks like as individuals. The other face of homelessness, which is much more invisible, is families with children. So that's where we're at with strides. I mean, I'm sorry to be a downer, but it's a dark time for Urbana right now. My office really, I really did not expect to be sitting here the fall of 2024. Facing fascism next year and seeing higher than ever cases of folks walking in the door that were at pandemic levels. That's hard for us to swallow. So, you know, we need to have hard conversations about what our priorities are, and frankly, we need to look at where are we spending our money, what are our priorities, and understand that budgets are moral documents. And I think that we've gotten used to being able to take on more optional items with our budgets, and I think we're going to have to really look at what are our core values, and we need to fund those core values.
All right, any other questions? James?
Yeah, I realize this only affects a very small population, but do we have any updated timeline for Hope Village to be open?
Yes. Yeah, it was, so the healthcare consumers was there today. It was a really great conversation, bringing together a lot of folks who are currently and formerly homeless with advocates and case managers and elected officials. So Hope Village is, they have a significant grant from IDA. They're building next year, 20 and 25, and they were looking for a launch in 2026. That's pretty much been it seems like they're continuing to say that that's their timeline. I will say that we're lucky to live in the state of Illinois, especially as a queer person. I'm feeling really lucky to live in the state of Illinois right now. And when I heard from the Office of Homelessness, the chief officer, the state has put a lot of focus and resources and attention to homelessness and housing insecurity. I think that is has shown up in the grants that we have across the board. And I think there are new funding sources available that use Medicaid waivers for supportive services, which I think will be important, and also medical respite. And so I think a place like Hope Village is a really good candidate for operational funds that are now available for medical respite for homeless individuals. So I feel like the pieces are coming together for that. We also have more organizations providing services, and I would say, and we've been upping our game. I think the quality of services, the trauma-informed care, and we continue to work on issues of racial bias and gender bias. I think we've made some inroads there as well. So, you know, I do think that there are more people in the game, so to speak.
Chris, did you have a question? No. All right, no further questions. We'll move on to new business. First item is resolution number T 2024-10006R, a resolution setting compensation of Cunningham Township officials for the 4-year term beginning May 19th, 2024. Cunningham Township Supervisor, Cunningham Township Clerk, and Cunningham Township Board, and beginning January 1st, 2025, Cunningham Township Assessor.
Point of process. That we have the dates wrong. It should say May 19th, 2025 for the supervisor and January 1st, 2026. I think the resolution is correct and the agenda item is incorrect, so just want to point that out.
You said January 2026?
Yeah, so it would be
Yes, January 1st, 2026.
January 1st. Great.
Thank you. All right. I know we talked about this at the last one. James?
Yeah, I would like to move this resolution with an update in the context of the discussion we had for the city salaries. I would like to propose propose it as it's stated. I would like to update both schedules to use the salary for the first year as 85,000, and then a 3% increase for each of the following years, which would be 87,550, 90,176, 92,882, and that's 4 years of salary, and then I think one of them carries over into another part. And I can speak to the motion if there's a second.
Okay, at the moment, there is a motion on the floor for the existing resolution with the updated amount starting at 85,000 for the township supervisor, 3% increase for all the following years to the fourth year. Is there any change in terms of the clerk and the township board?
I would use the same schedule for both positions.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, moved by James and seconded by Grace. James, would you like to speak to your?
Yeah, I'm just going to kind of reiterate the conversation that we had as we were working on the city part. These aren't tied together intrinsically, but I do believe, there's been a good case made for the need for an increase. I appreciate all of the detail that has been provided, looking at the various components and the comparables. Some of them are for countywide responsibilities, and those are understandably higher. I do believe that I am comfortable supporting this level of funding, this increase, which is roughly equivalent to the increase that we applied to the mayor's salary. I do believe that the mayor's function is more complex, has a responsibility that's financially much greater, but I also understand that the mayor has a larger executive staff to accomplish what they do, and so that's why I believe we should sync these up with what we move for the mayor's position, and that's why I've made this motion.
All right, any discussion? Grace?
Just also wanted to clarify when some of my thought process here too of looking at the current salaries of 72-some thousand, and I think a jump to 85 and then 3% I think is reasonable. I'm learning how much people make in a lot of professional roles and kind of balancing a lot of things as we had talked about last time. But I think that where we lie here, I think that it does make sense to be on par with the elected officials of other kinds of things like the mayor, and definitely see the need for an increase with cost going up and competitive salaries going up. And I think that this is, quite a initial jump of 13,000, and then the 3% I think is reasonable. I think people getting paid well is important, and then also just balancing the other things that we have financially and the other kinds of positions. So I think that this one's reasonable, and I'm happy to hear other thoughts.
Any other discussion?
I have a question,
Danielle?
factual question. So the last meeting, this council voted for the mayor's position to be 92,000, correct?
Yeah.
No.
It was 85.
Mm-hmm.
And if I may, I think it gets up to 92,882 after 3 years, right?
Just like this schedule.
Yeah, or after 4 years. So starting at 85 and then 3%. So at the end, it ends at just shy of 93 a year.
James?
I'm going to say one more thing, and while I wasn't, this was on my mind before when we were talking about this, but it's much more on my mind now. I feel like we are at significant risk in the next couple of years of going into a recession, going into significant economic turmoil because of the policies that have been stated by the incoming federal administration. And I'm a little bit, I have to say, I'm a little bit gun shy of going maybe as far as we might have gone with this. And I think starting, making this move now is taking in the feedback that we've gotten about where other comparable things are, but also using a little bit of care to not go as far as was requested, because we may have pressures on our budgets, and we don't know. I don't know. I just feel like with the coming administration's policies on economics, it's going to create a really challenging environment financially.
Therese, did you have any comment?
Basically, I kind of agree with James as far as I think we have to be more fiscally careful about how we do this. The other townships and the comparisons that I've noticed too is that they seem to have a larger revenue stream than the city of Urbana. We have our tax base is not as viable, I would say, as some of the other cities that we're doing these comparisons with. And we have to remember that the fact that we are trying to stay competitive, but comparison-wise, we cannot compare ourselves even to Bloomington Township. They have a larger revenue stream, tax base, and I think I think we need to be mindful of that kind of thing, as well as what James was saying is we don't know what kind of crises we may endure in the next 4 years. So I'm all for increasing the income and the what because we do want to stay somewhat competitive, but at the same time I think we have to be cautious.
All right, thank you. Given no further discussion, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote on this one.
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin?
Yes to the amendment, if that's what we're voting on?
I believe James did it in one.
Oh, that was your move.
I
There was
moved
an
the
amendment.
motion with the
With the amendment,
updated
okay.
schedule.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Quisenberry?
Yes.
All right, that motion passes. Next up is resolution number T 2024-11-007R, resolution authorizing the supervisor to sign a contract and intergovernmental agreement with the City of Champaign, Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus of Grant Fiscal Year 2025.
Okay, so I have spoken about this grant before, so I will just be brief. It is a grant from IDHS that comes through the Metropolitan Mayor's Council that goes through the city of Champaign that would come to Cunningham Township. You could say that four times fast. It serves both immigrants who have crossed the border recently, as well as those regardless of immigration status. So it's been broadened. The primary purpose of this fund for Cunningham Township will run the winter shelter for 20 residents, regardless of immigration status, provide case management 3 times a week, and food vouchers as well, so that people have access to food, clothing, shoes, bus passes, etc. We've added rental assistance, which I mentioned. We will also be doing 3 events. 2 events will be specific. All 3 events will do targeted outreach to immigrant families and community members. There is a new driver's license and state ID, which no longer looks different than the other driver's license and state ID. It's really important, especially in the political climate that we're in, that people just have an ID and that it doesn't indicate whether you're an immigrant or not, which can actually be quite dangerous for folks. So we are going to use the grant to pay for driver's licenses and state IDs, as well as some vehicle registrations to basically get folks to have up-to-date vehicle registration so that that is not an issue for them. All of it is grant funded, and it will, we're partnering with the Secretary of State on an event around that. The other two pieces are primarily legal navigation for work authorization. So there'll be legal navigation and fees related to the filings for work authorization. Happy to answer any questions that you have, but there's basically, you'll see an intergovernmental agreement and you'll also see a contract.
Questions? Grace?
Thank you so much for bringing this. I think it's a really great service, and I appreciate some of the reminders we've gotten of Urbana being a sanctuary city and not asking about or reacting based on anyone's legal status here. And I was just trying to understand logistically how this is working. So we're the subrecipient from the city of Champaign, and is this SMAS 3 the higher grant that's kind of going through the city? I guess I'm trying to figure out the city and this SMAS and
So
where they go.
from IDHS through the Metropolitan Mayor's Council to the city of Champaign to Cunningham Township,
Okay, thank you.
which, you know, that's however the money flows. We're happy to accept it to serve our folks in the community, so.
Other questions? All right, I would entertain a motion.
Move approval of resolution number T-2024-11007R, resolution authorizing the supervisor to sign a contract and intergovernmental agreement with the City of Champaign Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus Grant FY 25.
Second.
Moved by Grace, seconded by Jaya. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, that passes on. Next up is resolution number 2024-11008R, resolution authorizing the supervisor to sign an agreement for window replacement with renewal by Anderson of Central Illinois and Quad Cities with ARPA funds.
The short version is that the windows in the apartment units that we acquired, and we knew this when we purchased them, are poor, and they're in much worse shape now than they were before, as evidenced by both the utility bills and the number of times we've had to repair them or nail them, some of them nailed shut, keeping within the code. But we would like to replace everything so we have fully functional windows throughout all 8 units at the cost of $48,000. We got 3 bids, and all of it is paid for out of ARPA funds as per planned in those grant applications.
Any technical questions? James?
How many units again is that?
It's 8 units. It's quite a few number of, one is 2-bedroom units, although it's all the windows, so there's also living room and kitchen. And then the others are 1-bedroom units.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if there's no more technical questions. Therese, did you have a
How
question?
How many windows totally?
I think
Do
you
you
can
know?
see in the, I put the actual document and payment terms in so you can see, but I do not have it off the top of my head. It's, you can, let's see.
I was trying to find. I see 1, 2, 3, 4.
You have 4 in the 1-bedrooms, but in the 2-bedrooms, it's the next one down.
And these are $12,000 a piece per apartment.
Well, it depends on,
basically 12,500.
yeah, it depends on the apartment. Obviously, the 1-bedrooms are much more affordable than the 2-bedrooms. And just look, I'm trying to get an answer to your
I'm
question.
looking at it.
16, so 4 windows in the 1-bedroom and 16 windows in the 2-bedroom. We've had issues with pinched fingers with the sash that falls, so we're doing sliding, but there wasn't really a cost difference between high-quality double hung and sash windows. So we went with the sash windows, the sliding ones.
Uh-huh. Okay. Okay,
All right.
yes.
I would entertain a motion.
I'll move approval of resolution number T 2024-11-008R, resolution authorizing the supervisor to sign an agreement for window replacement with renewal by Anderson of Central Illinois and Quad Cities ARPA funds for approval.
Second.
Moved by Jay, seconded by Chandra. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, that motion passes. Next item is ordinance number T 2024-11-005, an ordinance levying taxes for all town purposed for the town of Cunningham, town of Cunningham, Champaign County, Illinois, for the tax year of 2024, collectible in year 2025.
I believe, as usual, what we do is we put this ordinance on file. It'll actually be passed next month after there's a public hearing. So the request is simply to put this on file and let the clerk know that a public hearing needs to be noticed. And that way it will remain here until we've gone through the proper 30 days notice. But it's essentially the same as last year in terms of the levy. I am doing double and triple checking with the numbers. I will let you know if anything changes.
We need a motion to put it on file.
Yes, we need a motion to put it on file.
Grace, did you have a question or a motion?
A question.
Go for it.
Thank you. Just wanting to clarify that this is the levy that is set by the referendum. Kind of legally at where the levy is set by voters, is that correct?
Yeah, so basically what happens is we have to levy it as though everything we want to happen will happen, even though everything we want to happen will not happen. So what we do is we essentially levy at a rate that anticipates the maximum amount of growth in EAV. Obviously, the Carl case is not hanging in the same way, although there are some Pravina case, we're in the process of working through that. So we levy at a rate that will actually be higher than what we anticipate. And then we could levy, right now it says $2,570,000. We could levy $20,570,000 and we'd still be capped under the same tax cap. So it's a little bit of just making sure that we levy enough just in case there's more EAV that comes onto the rolls than anticipated. And then we will be capped in the spring based on what the actuals are.
James.
Yeah, just for the benefit of those who might be watching, the Cunningham Township is covered by tax caps, unlike the city of Champaign, or city of Urbana, which has home rule. And so you try to expand your levy based on what you think might happen, as Danielle summarized, but it will be trimmed back to what the limitation of tax caps provide. I guess it is possible that there's a certain expectation of the outcome of those ongoing legal cases. They could turn out to be more favorable than we expect. We'd love for that to happen, and that would potentially mean that that money we already have. We have that in escrow in township, as we
Yes.
did in the city. So if we don't end up having to spend all the stuff that we have in escrow, that could help us in the end, but we can't count on that. Is that a fair summary?
Great summary, James.
All right. I would take a motion if somebody's willing to give me one. The motion would be to put this on file.
I would move to put on file ordinance number T 2024-11-005, an ordinance levying taxes for all town proposed for the town of Cunningham, Champaign County, Illinois, for the tax year 2024, collectible 2025.
Second.
Moved by Grace, seconded by Sharice. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed? All right, that motion carries. The last item on our agenda is a closed session. Closed session pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2C5 for the purchase of lease or real property. May I have a motion?
I'll move on the basis of that exemption from the Open Meetings Act.
Second.
Moved by James, seconded by Sharice. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Miss Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Miss Hersey,
Yes.
Miss Colasetti,
Yes.
Miss Bishop,
Yes.
Miss Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
For the public, this meeting does not have any other business after this. City Council will follow immediately when we return from closed session. Thank you. All right, we are back from closed session. Can I have a motion to go back into open session?
So moved.
Sharice
Second.
Hersey.
Moved by James, seconded by Grace. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Should be a roll call, but
Sorry, roll call.
Miss Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans, Miss Hersey,
Yes.
Miss Colasetti,
Yes.
Miss Bishop,
Yes.
Miss Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
yes.
That motion carries with no further business in front of this board. This meeting is adjourned. City Council, Committee of the Whole will begin in just a moment.